Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here, back with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Tuesday, August the 27th, 2024. So here's a look at the Atlantic Basin here, courtesy of Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com, looking at the GOES 16 true color visible satellite imagery. And as we could see right now, there are areas to watch coming off of Africa right now. We have an area to watch right now that the National Hurricane Center has in place for the central main development region. We do have some showers and thunderstorms in this area that are trying to consolidate and form an area of low pressure. We have another tropical wave coming off of Africa. This could do something a little bit more promising as it moves in this general area, but right now some of the model guidance is mediocre on this one. And then over the Gulf of Mexico, we have some disorganized showers and thunderstorms, nothing too significant to worry about. And also in the Caribbean looking quiet as well. But when we take a look at our latest 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook, courtesy of the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida, they're giving this area to watch a 20% chance in the main development region. So if you're in the northern Windward Islands, if you're in the Greater Antilles, including the U.S. British Virgin Islands, including for Puerto Rico, you still need to be monitoring the progress of this system as this moves generally west-northwestward at 10 to 15 miles per hour. So now there's a lot of speculation if this tropical wave is going to develop into our next named storm. There is a lot of uncertainty in the forecast models, and this has not changed much in the last 5, even 10 days. I thought we were going to have something out of this wave. Now the models are like, nope, probably not going to develop. But we'll see. Something to still monitor, and that's why the NHC is still having a 20% chance on this. So as we go forward here in the next, say, 12 hours or so, well, this afternoon or so for August the 27th, what we're looking at here is the vorticity and color shading. We have a big ridge of high pressure to the north of this, and we have our winds, our intertropical convergence zone, our West African monsoon. We have this bending of winds where we have northeasterly winds here, we have southwesterly winds here, and we get a lot of vorticity that develops here. And does that vorticity get released eventually and congeal into something more significant? Well, let's take a look at the GFS model here in the forecast over the next 4 days. Nothing much going on. However, there is a lot of vorticity coming off of Africa, so we'll have to watch that wave. And then there is our wave of interest that the NHC is monitoring. Now, the GFS model still thinks this is not going to develop, and it's pretty impressive at showing that here. This has been pretty consistent even over the next 5 days. Really not much with that wave, and as this continues to move off generally towards the west, it is going to take about 7 to 8 days even to get over here. So it's not moving very much. And you can see barely a signature in the vorticity map at 5,000 feet, barely indicating any spin. Here comes our next disturbance that eventually tries to get going. And then there's something else in the Gulf of Mexico we may have to watch. But at this point, we're just going to take each global deterministic model as a grain of salt because this is going to change. I mean, there is very, very little confidence in the forecast right now. It's just very disappointing that we cannot get consistency out of these models. One model shows a Cat 5 hurricane, the next model has a Cat 1, the next model has a tropical depression, and then it's just back and forth, back and forth. And so until we get consistency here, I am not even going to show you the ensembles because those have been uptrending a lot and then really downtrending. Actually, I will show you that briefly here and just to kind of show you some evidence what I mean by that. Because it's just going back and forth, but there is still a chance of tropical development with this. You can see right here that little signature over the central Windward Islands. There is our next tropical wave coming off of Africa. We'll see if the NHC eventually gets that dubbed, but probably not right now based on how inconsistent the GFS model is. And by the time we go to 300 hours out, we can see there is our next system. But for sure enough, it's 300 hours out, and this is through about the 8th of September. Now, there's one other model that seems to be doing pretty good at the prediction here, and that's the ICON model. This is a look at the 10-meter surface wind plot from the German model. This is initialized about 12Z. This is the complete run. The intermediate run only goes out to 5 days, and I'll even show you that here in today's video. Actually, before we actually show you that, you can see how inconsistent the GFS actually has been. This is just ridiculous. Beyond ridiculous, showing a major hurricane one and then just nothing the next. But of course, it is pretty far out. But also, to begin with, is it the atmosphere very conducive or is it not conducive? You know, it's going back and forth. But the ICON model is probably going to shine some consistency here as we look at the forecast model. We can see clearly in the next 4 days, we do have that tropical wave that does try to develop here. And you can see some convergence. And then eventually it approaches the Caribbean here. Let's zoom a little closer in at 1,002 millibars. Then if we look all the way out to 180 hours out, we can see that the system does deepen a little more significantly. This has been consistent. When we look at last night's 0Z forecast, we can see the disturbance right there. It's all about the footprint, not the intensity, so to speak. When we look at the 12Z run from yesterday, still that signal there. And then we go back and look at the 0Z run from Monday, August the 26th. So nearly almost about a day, about 2 days ago, almost. By this afternoon it will be, or evening. And then we go back one more, still that signal. And if we go into the 12Z run today, we can see pretty remarkable at keeping that area of spin going. As this goes further west, it could develop. So not ruling out the possibility that this does or doesn't develop. Anyone living in the northern Windward Islands still needs to be monitoring the progress of this system. Now, the reason why you shouldn't take your eyes off these tropical waves coming off of Africa is if we take a look at our global tropical hazardous outlook from the Climate Prediction Center over the next 3 weeks. This is updated. This goes all the way through the middle of September now, and we do have a low to medium chance of tropical development in the main development region, even including the southwestern Atlantic. And yes, there's a new area to keep an eye on for the southern Gulf of Mexico, including for the northwestern portion of the Caribbean. And this continues all the way through the next 3 weeks with that low to medium chance of tropical development over the main development region. So we are not going to take our eyes off of this just yet, just because that there's no development now. There could be some development all the way through the next 3 weeks in the main development region of the Atlantic. And yes, a lot of us live over here in the mainland of the United States, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, the Windward, Leeward Islands, and even the Lesser Antilles. So that's why we do need to watch these type of weather patterns closely, because evidently there is still some favorability there, climatology speaking, through most of September. Now, of course, we cannot forget about our friends that live in Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. More on Shanshan here in a little bit. There is a high risk of development or typhoon development in the Western Pacific, thanks to a very coherent, very active MJO event approaching the maritime continent. So over the next 3 weeks, you can also expect a high level of chance of tropical development. But now remember that I was going to show you all what the signal is looking like on this tropical wave that is currently the one that the NHC is monitoring. We can see that in this run, this is this morning's ensemble forecast from the Euro, really a decreased signal than what we had just 24 hours ago when we had a lot of these red tracks kind of curving out like this. Instead, now we have a very anemic, minute signal. We still have tracks, but not a big signal like we had just 24 hours ago. And we can show you that here. This is from 12 hours ago. From last night's ensemble forecast, indicating a lot of tracks, possibly tropical storm or hurricane, versus in today's ensemble forecast, you can see the difference here. Really decreased on the track forecast with some of these members not indicating a whole lot of development versus some really indicating a lot. Now, this wave behind it has a better chance, a little bit more consistency on that wave, but this is more than likely going to be moving off towards the west-northwest and could in fact miss land areas. Not to say that it could just turn right back like we had with some historic hurricanes before, where they go northwest, they find they find themselves underneath a much stronger ridge, and then they kind of are able to dive back to the west. We'll see if that one happens here with this wave. But right now, at least in the 7-day time frame, this signal here with this wave has decreased a little bit. So now that we got the Atlantic out of the way as far as tropical development, it's also a really good idea that we cover Typhoon Shanshan as it approaches Japan. We don't want to forget about our friends that are watching this from Japan, from Taiwan, from the Ryukyu Islands, even in Tokyo, because this is a very, very concerning typhoon by all means. When we look at the latest Hamari 9 Channel 13 IR satellite imagery, courtesy again of Levi Cowan, tropicaltidbits.com, but also helpful to get this from Japan with its satellite imagery data, we can see a very deep area of a ring of deep convection surrounding the eye, and over the last few hours, this has not moved at all. This just has not. It's pretty much stationary right now and could be going through another eyewall replacement cycle. We'll see about that. But some of these Ryukyu Islands down here to the south of the eye of Shanshan, this is devastating. Absolutely devastation. Heavy rainfall, you bet. 40 to 50 foot waves impacting these islands with winds of about 130, 145 miles an hour. So this is a devastating typhoon by all means. And this is going to eventually be getting very close, or if not on top of Japan for several days as it mills around and encounters weak steering current. For reference, this is a look at the map of Japan. Again, I'm not really good at covering this portion of the Pacific. By all means, I'm an Atlantic person, but during big storms like this, we like to kind of cover these systems in the Western Pacific, and this is no exception. Here is Tokyo. Here's the Ryukyu Islands down here. Hiroshima is up here in the southwestern tip of, or more the southwestern side of China. And the system is down here, and it's just going to be milling around and then eventually making its way onto Japan, the mainland, and it's going to really do a lot of destruction. Take a look at the rainfall forecast when I show you that here in a little bit. It's in millimeters, but I'll convert that to you all. It's not looking pleasant, in the range of potentially several feet of rainfall in some areas. So here's a look at the this is a look at the forecast from the HAVS-A. This is a hurricane-specific model, and I always like looking at this because it gives us an idea what the typhoon is encountering right now. In fact, if we just kind of zoom out and look at the water vapor imagery, there you can see there is a little bit of drier air just to the northwest of the system. You can see this black contour here, this black patch. There's also a little bit of dry air just to the northwest of the eye of the typhoon. But what's going to end up happening is this trough is going to be able to get disintegrated, and the system is going to encounter itself in very light shear environment, and the moisture or the drier air is not going to be able to get forced in. Unfortunately, and which would otherwise help weaken the system. Instead, we're going to have a very intense, formidable, perhaps a violent typhoon impacting Japan. So this look at the HAVS-A model on Shanshan, or 11W, W given the name because it's in the Western Pacific. This is not in the Atlantic. So we can see a lot of moisture on this system in teal colors. That's a lot of heavy rainfall, rain bands, eye wall structure, that sort of thing. But you can see this brown area to the northwest. It's not going to impede or prevent strengthening. And in fact, this could remain very intense for a while. Now, the weakening that does commence here will not because of the drier air, but because of upwelling of sea surface temperatures. If we look at the sea surface temperature map here, where the typhoon moves over, we can see that there's going to be a lot of this upwelling. Those water temperatures go from, say, 30 Celsius to at least maybe even 18 degrees Celsius. So they drop dramatically with this typhoon. And then it just kind of mills around there. It doesn't really move at all. continuing to help upwell a lot of the water beneath the typhoon. So the ending result will be that the system will eventually slowly spin down, but if it moves southwest away from that cold patch of water, it could reorganize, and I'll show you that here on the GFS in a little bit. So you can see just this system not going to be moving at all perhaps over the next 5 days. This is the worst case scenario that you could ever have with a typhoon. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the buildings are built for this kind of thing, but some buildings are outdated and may not be. So looking at the 200 millibar wind, this is why the system is going to stall out. You can see this trough is going to exit. It's not going to really be enough to usher this storm northward, and this trough is moving out. So the ending result here is this system is going to find itself in some very weak steering currents. Nothing to really nudge this to kind of pop this loose into the westerly type jet stream to its north, and instead this is just going to mill around with very light weak steering currents and very little wind shear. The only weakening, if it does occur, would be because of upwelling of sea surface temperatures beneath the typhoon. So now the GFS model has even a more concerning scenario. This is the 18Z GFS model over the next 5 days. You can see that the system again approaches that Hiroshima area of Japan and even near Tokyo, and you can see a lot of heavy rainfall. Now, what the GFS wants to do here is after the 4-day period, the system might actually retrograde and move further west. We have a lot of complicated futures that make this possibly an outlying scenario. If we look at the 12Z run, we can see that the system was a little bit further west than this current run that we're seeing, and the ending result is that on the 12Z run, it just hangs around for the next 7 days perhaps. This would be devastating, similar to Debbie, but only that Shanshan is a lot more stronger than Debbie in itself. And what ends up happening is this kind of parallels the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, and then actually retrogrades and may slam into Taiwan and then eventually into China. Man, this could be a system that we track for quite some time, and there has been some consistency in the last few model runs indicating that that is a very much of a possible scenario. So now looking at the spaghetti plot on Typhoon Shanshan for Japan, take a look at all of these spaghetti plots. This is pretty alarming. Some of these tracks here are in the pink color, which indicate pressures 940 to 950 millibars. But of course, when we look at our hurricane models, we could see pressures easily down to 920, 915, 930 millibars, which would make this a violent typhoon with Category 5 force winds in that area. So, and you could also see here, it's not going to be moving a whole lot. It's just going to be kind of drifting and milling around here in central and southwestern Japan. And therefore, there's going to be a lot of rain and flood problems. Let's look at the Joint Typhoon Warning Center track forecast here. I love their maps that they make, but sometimes a little bit complicated. I'm not used to seeing something like this, but you can see that the system moves, it takes literally 4 to 5 days just to get into Japan, and then moves a little bit further west, and then basically kind of flips a U-ey and then might go back eventually. This is not indicating that right now. As always, this is more of a generous forecast, but other models are showing otherwise, that this could do something like that. It can go around like this and kind of mill around here and cause a lot of havoc in Japan to the Tokyo, Hiroshima area. Now, the biggest concern with Typhoon Shanshan will be the amount of rainfall that comes down with this. This is really, really alarming. This is a biggie. This is a monster. This is full destruction, perhaps, over portions of Japan. Take a look at these rainfall totals. These are in millimeters, and I will extrapolate that with help of Google for that. So rainfall amounts here anywhere between about, say, 800 millimeters all the way up to 1,500 millimeters. 1,500 millimeters, if that even happens, that is up to about 60 inches of rainfall. 59 to 60 inches. That is very bad. That is unsurvivable flooding. Now, of course, if this mills around any longer, rainfall totals in that area could exceed 1,800, 16 to 1,800 millimeters. And yeah, if you put that into reference, that is 71 inches of rainfall in under 10 days. That is very, very, very bad. That is devastating. And when we look at prior model runs, pretty consistent here in the southwestern portion of Japan, near these islands of the Ryukyus, and over just the Tokyo area, get just decimated by a lot of rainfall. And now our 18Z model run is now coming in and still indicating the same thing, not as significant as our last model run, but still 1,300 to 1,400 millimeters. That is in the ballpark of several feet perhaps. In fact, if we go 1,400 millimeters, that is 55 inches of rainfall on the GFS operational model. So this could be full devastation and unsurvivable, unfortunately, for those people that are watching this from Japan. Combined with that with surf, wow, the surf is going to be immense with this, and we're going to look at our maximum individual wave height, since this is going to just be hanging around for a while. So the average wave height here is going to be about 30 to 35 feet tall as this gets closer and closer to Japan. But the thing is, the maximum individual wave height, so some of the waves with some of the sets that come in, what we call a swell, we could see surf up to of over 60 feet. In some instances, we could see surf as high as 70 feet on top of storm surge of 5 to 10 feet, maybe even 15 feet in some of these areas. On top of the surf, it's just not going to end very well. And do I rarely say this, folks? Watch what I say, folks, because I don't like hyping things up. This could cause mass fatalities, all right? So that's why I want you all to, if you're watching this again from Japan, please share this with your family and friends. This is serious. This is just something that Japan doesn't ever see very often. You do see typhoons, but something that just stalls like this at a major intensity is something really just kind of out of a wonky movie or out of the movie Twister, where you just get sucked into one of the strongest tornadoes that you see in Twister. That's kind of what this is, but not the strongest typhoon ever on record, but it's going to be very devastating nevertheless. But anyways, if you found this video very helpful, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and sharing this video with your family and friends on social media. As long as the Atlantic does not surprise us with some big time tropical activity, as long as Shanshan remains a threat to Japan, we will keep you all updated on this YouTube channel to cover that risk in that area. And I feel bad for those people that live in Japan. My hearts and thoughts are going to those that do live in Japan, including one of my famous friends, not famous, but Rose in the Rain. You live in the Japan area. So my heart and thought goes out to you that live in that area with all the heavy rain and gusty winds. Please be safe, brother. And I will see you all in my next video tomorrow.